The moment I pulled away those storage boxes in our basement, I knew my life would never be the same. Behind the shelving unit was a door, one that shouldn't exist according to our home's blueprint. What I discovered behind it wasn't just a hidden room, it was a carefully constructed chamber of horrors that belonged to my 17-year-old son. As both a mother and a child psychologist, I was faced with an impossible question. Was my son planning murders, or was there something even more sinister at play? The first sign that something was wrong wasn't the cold draft from behind the storage shelves, or even the barely visible seam in the basement wall. It was the inexplicable feeling of dread that washed over me the moment I moved those dusty Christmas boxes. I'd been a child psychologist long enough to trust my instincts. 23 years of analyzing behavioral patterns had taught me that when something feels wrong, it usually is. But this was different. This was my home, my sanctuary. "That's odd," I whispered, my breath visible in the chilly December air. The basement wall behind our storage unit didn't match the blueprint of our 1930s colonial home. There shouldn't be anything behind it, except soil and foundation. I ran my fingers along the edge where wall met concrete floor, discovering a slight groove. With trembling hands, I pushed against the panel, feeling resistance before it gave way with a soft click. A door, a hidden door in my own basement. The hinges protested as I pulled it open, revealing darkness beyond. Fumbling for my phone, I activated the flashlight, its beam cutting through the blackness to reveal a space roughly 8 by 10 feet. The walls were lined with heavy-duty plastic sheeting. A small table stood in the center, its surface clean and organized with various tools laid out with surgical precision. "No," I whispered, my professional detachment crumbling as maternal panic took its place. "This can't be happening." On the far wall, a corkboard displayed newspaper clippings about 3 local missing teenagers. Red string connected them to maps, locations circled in black marker. Below the board sat a locked metal box and a leather-bound journal. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Elliot, my son, my brilliant, quiet 17-year-old who'd grown increasingly withdrawn since his father's death 3 years ago. My phone buzzed in my hand, a text from Elliot himself. "Coming home early, practice cancelled." I backed out of the room, heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped animal. With shaking hands, I pulled the door closed, carefully returning the storage shelves to their original position. Upstairs in my study, I collapsed into my chair, professional training battling maternal instinct. I should call the police. That's what any reasonable person would do upon discovering what appeared to be a murder-planning room in their basement. But I couldn't, not yet, not without understanding. As a psychologist, I knew appearances could be deceiving. As a mother, I needed to believe there was an explanation beyond the horrifying obvious. The front door opened, followed by the familiar sound of Elliot's backpack hitting the floor. "Mom, you home?" His voice, still caught between boyhood and manhood, echoed through the house. I took a deep breath, forcing my face into casual composure. "In my study, honey." He appeared in the doorway, tall and lanky, his father's blue eyes peering from beneath a shock of dark hair. "My son, my possible monster. Everything okay?" he asked, brow furrowing. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Perhaps I had. The ghost of the child I thought I knew. "Just tired," I lied, my professional training creating a mask of normalcy. "How was school?" As he shrugged and launched into mundane details about his day, I made a decision. Before I involved anyone else, I needed evidence, concrete proof one way or another. I would investigate my own son, applying the same analytical approach I'd used with thousands of troubled youth throughout my career. But this time, the stakes were infinitely higher. If I was wrong, I could destroy what remained of our fractured family. If I was right, I couldn't bear to complete the thought. Sleep evaded me that night, my mind cycling through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. By morning, I had formulated a plan. I would approach this as both a mother and a psychologist, gathering information methodically while maintaining normalcy. After Elliot left for school, I began my investigation in his bedroom, a space that had become increasingly off-limits as he progressed through his teenage years. I respected his privacy generally, but these circumstances demanded intervention. His room was meticulously organized, unusual for a teenager. Books arranged by subject and author, clothes folded. Precisely, desk immaculate. This orderliness wasn't new, but it had intensified over the past year. As a psychologist, I recognized this could indicate an attempt to control external environments when internal thoughts felt chaotic. I checked under the mattress, inside dresser drawers, behind posters, all the typical teenage hiding places. Nothing unusual until I reached his closet. Behind a row of hanging clothes, I discovered a false back panel. My hands trembled as I removed it, revealing a small alcove containing a laptop I'd never seen before, a collection of thumb drives labeled by date, and a shoebox filled with newspaper clippings. More stories about missing persons, some dating back 5 years. I powered on the laptop, finding it password protected. After 3 failed attempts with birth dates and pet names, I set it aside. The thumb drives would require the computer to access. I photographed everything with my phone before carefully returning items to their exact positions. Elliot was observant. He would notice if anything was disturbed. By afternoon, I'd contacted my brother-in-law, Raymond Sullivan, a detective with Boston PD. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from prying eyes. "You look terrible, Mags," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. Ray had been my late husband, Thomas's best friend before becoming his family, and after Thomas's unexpected death 3 years ago, Ray had stepped in as a surrogate father figure for Elliot. "I haven't been sleeping well," I admitted, clutching my coffee mug. "I need to ask you something, but it stays between us. Professional discretion." Ray's expression sobered. "Of course. Have there been any developments in the Sophia Richardson case?" I asked, referring to the most recent local disappearance, a 16-year-old girl who'd vanished walking home from a friend's house 3 weeks ago. "Why are you asking about Sophia?" Ray's eyes narrowed. "I'm counseling several students from her school," I lied. "They're struggling with her disappearance. I'm trying to provide appropriate support." Ray hesitated before answering. "We found her backpack yesterday, dumped in Breakheart Reservation. No other signs of her. Why the specific interest, Mags? This isn't like you." "Just trying to help my patients," I maintained, changing the subject. "How's Elliot been during your weekend fishing trips? Has he seemed different to you?" "Teenagers are always changing," Ray shrugged. "He's quieter maybe, more thoughtful, asks a lot of questions about my cases, but that's not new. He's always been fascinated by my work." I nodded, filing away this information. Elliot's interest in Ray's detective work had indeed been consistent since childhood, but I wondered now if there was something more sinister behind his curiosity. As I drove home, my phone rang. Elliot's school principal, Zachary Morris. "Dr. Thornwood, I hope—" "So I'm not interrupting," he began, his tone professionally concerned. "I wanted to discuss Elliot's recent behavior. His English teacher found something concerning in his creative writing assignment. Would you be available to meet tomorrow?" My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "What kind of concerning content?" "I'd rather discuss it in person," he replied. "It may be nothing, but given recent community events, we're being cautious." I agreed to the meeting, my dread deepening. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed Elliot's girlfriend Olivia's bicycle leaning against the porch. I hadn't expected her today. What were they doing in the house? Alone? And more importantly, were they anywhere near the basement? The sound of laughter greeted me as I entered the house. Elliot and Olivia in the kitchen making sandwiches. Nothing sinister, just 2 teenagers engaged in normal afternoon activities. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Hi, Mrs. Thornwood," Olivia smiled, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "I hope it's okay I'm here. We're working on a chemistry project." "Of course," I replied, studying her. Olivia Parker had been dating Elliot for nearly 6 months. A sweet, intelligent girl who'd lost her mother to cancer 2 years ago. I'd always liked her, but now I wondered how much she knew about my son. "We'll be in the dining room," Elliot said, avoiding eye contact as he gathered their plates and notebooks. I nodded, watching them retreat before slipping down to the basement, ostensibly to start laundry. Once there, I checked the hidden room. The storage shelves appeared undisturbed, but when I opened the secret door, I noticed subtle changes. The journal was missing and the tools had been rearranged. Someone had been here recently. That evening, after Olivia left and Elliot retreated to his room for homework, I made a decision. I needed to see what was in that locked metal box in the hidden room. While Elliot showered, I searched his room again, locating a small key taped to the underside of his desk drawer. Heart racing, I waited until after midnight. Once Elliot's light went out and his soft snores echoed down the hallway, I crept to the basement. The key fit perfectly. Inside the box, I found a collection of items that stopped my breath. a silver charm bracelet, identical to one Sophia Richardson had been wearing in her missing poster, a driver's license belonging to another missing teen, Jeremy Winters, and most disturbing of all, a flash drive labeled Thomas Evidence. Thomas, my husband, Elliot's father. What possible connection could he have to this nightmare? I pocketed the flash drive, carefully relocking the box and returning everything to its place. The next morning, I met with Principal Morris, who showed me Elliot's writing assignment, a first-person narrative describing in clinical detail the psychological breakdown of someone who discovers they've been living with a killer. The protagonist's realization that they've been blind to the truth was written with disturbing insight. It's exceptionally well written, Morris said carefully, but given the recent disappearances and Elliot's intensity about the subject, we felt you should be aware. I thanked him, assuring him I would speak with Elliot while downplaying my own alarm. The story could be interpreted multiple ways. Perhaps it was merely a creative exploration influenced by having a psychologist for a mother and a detective for an uncle. Or perhaps it was something far more sinister. That afternoon, I plugged the flash drive into my work laptop, protected by hospital-grade security software. What I found shattered everything I thought I knew. The drive contained surveillance photos of my husband Thomas meeting with unknown individuals, documents with offshore account numbers, and most shocking of all, crime scene photos that had never been released to the public, photos only someone in law enforcement would have access to. My phone rang, startling me. "Ray, Mags, we need to talk." His voice was tight with tension. "It's about Elliot." "What about him?" I asked, my mouth dry. "He came to the station today asking questions about your husband's accident, specific questions about the brake lines in Thomas's car." The room seemed to tilt. Thomas had died when his car went off the road 3 years. Hagatuyos ruled an accident due to brake failure. "Ray," I whispered, "I think there's something you need to see." Before he could respond, I heard the front door open. Elliot was home early, again, and judging by the heavy footsteps heading straight for the basement, he knew something was wrong. I ended the call abruptly, shoving the flash drive into my pocket as I hurried downstairs. Elliot was already at the basement door. "What are you doing?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. He turned, his face a mask of teenage innocence that no longer fooled me. "Getting my hockey gear, practice tonight." A lie. I knew his schedule, no practice on Wednesdays. "Elliot," I said, summoning all my professional calm, "we need to talk." "About what?" His eyes darted toward the basement door, then back to me. "About the room." I watched his expression carefully, seeing the minute tightening around his eyes. Confirmation. The hidden room in the basement. For a moment, he maintained the facade of confusion, then his shoulders slumped. "How long have you known?" "Since yesterday." "What is it, Elliot? What are you involved in?" He looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in months. "It's not what you think, Mom." "Then explain it to me," I said, gesturing to the living room, "because right now I'm thinking the worst." We sat across from each other, the coffee table between us like a demilitarized zone. Elliot's hands twisted in his lap, a childhood nervous habit I hadn't seen in years. "It started after Dad died," he began, voice low. "I found things that didn't make sense. Dad wasn't who we thought he was." "The flash drive," I said. "I found it. The surveillance photos, the offshore accounts." Shock registered on his face. "You went through my things. You created a murder room in our basement," I countered. "I think that justifies some invasion of privacy." "It's not a murder room," he said emphatically. "It's an investigation room. Everything in there is evidence." "Evidence of what?" Elliot hesitated, conflict evident in his expression. "Dad was involved in something dangerous. I think he was working with someone in law enforcement, someone corrupt." My mind immediately went to Ray. No, it couldn't be. Not Thomas's best friend. "The missing teenagers?" I pressed. "Connected," Elliot nodded. "The first disappearance happened 6 weeks before Dad's accident. He was investigating it unofficially. I found his notes hidden in his old fishing gear. Why didn't you come to me with this?" "Because you were finally getting better," he said, his voice breaking. "After Dad died, you were so broken. I couldn't do that to you again, and I wasn't sure who to trust." The doorbell rang, interrupting us. Through the peephole, I saw Ray on the porch, his police cruiser in the driveway. "It's your uncle," I said, turning back to Elliot. The color drained from his face. "Don't let him in." "What? Why?" "The surveillance photos on the drive," Elliot whispered urgently. Look at them again. Really look at them. A chill ran through me as the doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. Mags, I know you're in there, Ray called. We need to talk about Elliot. I pulled out my phone, quickly accessing the photos I'd transferred from the flash drive. In my initial shock, I'd focused on Thomas, barely registering the other figures. Now I looked more carefully at the man my husband was meeting in several photos. The image was grainy, captured from a distance, but unmistakable. Raymond Sullivan, passing what appeared to be an envelope to my husband. He was Dad's handler, Elliot said, watching comprehension dawn on my face. Dad was an informant, but something went wrong. The pounding on the door grew louder. Margaret, open up. The basement, I whispered. The hidden room. Now. As we slipped downstairs, I heard the sound of a key in the lock, the spare I'd given Ray years ago during a family emergency. Margaret? His voice echoed through the house as Elliot and I pressed ourselves against the wall behind the storage shelves. The secret door closed behind us. In the dim light of the hidden room, surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy I still didn't fully understand, I held my terrified son close and made a silent vow. I would protect him, no matter what truths we uncovered. The beam of a flashlight swept across the basement floor, footsteps heavy on the stairs. Ray's voice called out, deceptively casual. Come on, Mags. I know you're down here. We're family, remember? I just want to talk. In the hidden room, Elliot and I remained motionless, barely breathing. My mind raced, recalibrating everything I thought I knew about my life. If Ray was corrupt, if Thomas had been his informant rather than his friend, what did that mean about my husband's death? About the missing teenagers? I've been patient, Ray continued, his voice closer now. 3 years of watching and waiting, making sure Thomas didn't leave anything behind, being the supportive brother-in-law. His laugh sent shivers down my spine. And now the kid starts digging just like his father. Through a crack in the hidden door, I could see Ray running his hand along the basement wall, searching. He knew about the room. I reached for my phone, intending to call 911, only to realize I'd left it upstairs in my panic. Elliot squeezed my hand, pointing to the leather journal on the table. He opened it silently, revealing not the disturbing manifesto I'd feared, but a meticulously documented investigation. Names, dates, connections, all pointing to a trafficking operation using the Boston port, with Ray as a key facilitator. The final pages contained Thomas's last entries, dated just before his death. R suspects I've found the girls. Meeting with FBI tomorrow. Need to move family to safe house. He never made that meeting. Found you. Ray's voice carried a note of triumph as the storage shelves began to move. With nowhere to run, I grabbed a screwdriver from the table, a pitiful weapon against Ray's service pistol, but better than nothing. The door swung open, revealing Ray's silhouette, gun already drawn. Oh, Mags, he sighed, eyes taking in the investigation board. You should have stayed in your lane, playing family counselor to troubled teens, never asking why some of them just disappeared. You killed them, I said, positioning myself in front of Elliot. Not all of them, Ray shrugged. Most went overseas. Very profitable market for attractive American teenagers in certain countries. Thomas stumbled onto it by accident. Wrong place, wrong time. I convinced him to look the other way. For a cut, of course. But he couldn't, I realized. He was gathering evidence against you. Your husband developed a conscience, Ray sneered. Cost him his life, and now it'll cost you yours. Murder-suicide has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Grieving widow finally snaps, kills her son before turning the gun on herself. You won't get away with this, Elliot said, his voice steadier than I expected. I've uploaded everything to a secure server. If anything happens to us, it goes to every law enforcement agency in the country. Ray hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his face. He's bluffing, Ray decided, raising his gun. A deafening bang echoed through the basement, but it wasn't Ray's weapon. A figure appeared behind him. Officer Daniel Cooper, a young patrolman I recognized from community events, his service weapon trained on Ray. Drop it, Detective Sullivan, Cooper ordered. FBI has been monitoring your calls. Your warehouse was raided 20 minutes ago. It's over. Ray's face contorted with rage as he swung his gun toward Cooper. 2 shots rang out. Ray crumpled to the floor. As Cooper secured the scene and called for backup, I held Elliot close, the full weight of the past 3 years crashing down on us both. Dad was trying to stop him, Elliot whispered. He was a hero. Later, As FBI agents combed through our basement and Ray was taken away in an ambulance, Special Agent Harlow explained the full scope of the investigation. "We've been building a case against Sullivan for years. Your husband was working with us unofficially. When he died, we suspected Sullivan but couldn't prove it." "And the teenagers?" I asked. "4 have been recovered so far," Harlow said, "including Sophia Richardson. She's alive, though traumatized. Without your son's evidence, we might never have found them in time." As dawn broke over our home, now a crime scene, I watched Elliot speaking with investigators, his shoulders straight, his father's determination evident in his stance. My son hadn't built a murder room, he'd built a war room to finish what his father had started. 3 months later, our lives had found a new normal, one built on hard truths rather than comfortable lies. Ray had survived his wounds and now awaited trial, along with 12 other members of the trafficking ring. Sophia Richardson and the other recovered teenagers were in intensive therapy, their families grateful but forever changed. Our basement had been renovated, the hidden room converted into a storage space filled with ordinary household items. No secrets, no shadows. The physical reminders were gone, but the knowledge remained, reshaping our understanding of the past. I stood at Thomas's grave on a crisp spring morning, Elliot beside me. We'd come here countless times in the 3 years since his death, but this visit felt different. We were no longer mourning a victim of random tragedy, but honoring a man who died trying to save innocent lives. "Dad would be proud of you," I said, watching Elliot place stones on the headstone, a tradition he'd started after the funeral. "I just finished what he started," Elliot replied, his voice deeper now, aged by experience rather than time. "You risked everything. That takes extraordinary courage." Elliot shrugged, uncomfortable with praise as always. "I had help. Lucas was the one who set up the secure server, and Olivia was keeping watch," I finished, the final piece clicking into place. "That's why she was at the house so often." He nodded. "Her cousin was one of the first to disappear. She recognized Ray from a photo in my dad's files. That's when we knew we couldn't trust him. My brilliant, secretive son had assembled his own investigation team, teenagers fighting against monsters adults couldn't or wouldn't see. As we walked back to the car, Special Agent Harlow approached, her expression somber. "Dr. Thornwood, Elliot," she nodded in greeting. "I'm sorry to intrude, but there's been a development." My stomach tightened. "What kind of development?" "Sullivan's made a deal, limited immunity in exchange for information about other trafficking networks." "You can't be serious," I said, anger flaring. "After everything he's done?" "I don't like it either," Harlow admitted, "but the information could save hundreds of lives. There's something else, though, something you should know." She hesitated, glancing at Elliot. "It's about Thomas." "What about him?" Elliot asked. "Sullivan claims Thomas wasn't just an informant who stumbled onto the operation. He says Thomas was involved from the beginning, only turning informant when he feared exposure." "That's a lie," I said immediately. "He's trying to tarnish Thomas's memory, corrupt the one thing we have left." "We think so too," Harlow agreed, "but we need to investigate the claim. I wanted you to hear it from me first." After she left, Elliot and I sat in silence, the possibility hanging between us like poison. "It's not true," Elliot finally said, but I heard the question in his voice. "We'll face whatever the truth is," I promised, together. That night, unable to sleep, I went to Thomas's old home office, a room I'd preserved like a museum since his death. In the back of his desk drawer, behind files and forgotten paperwork, I found a sealed envelope addressed to me in his handwriting, marked, "In case of emergency." With trembling hands, I opened it, unfolding a letter dated 1 week before his death. "My dearest Margaret," it began, "if you're reading this, then I failed and you're in danger. Everything I've done to protect you and Elliot, but I fear that's no longer possible." The letter detailed how Thomas had indeed been involved initially, not in trafficking but in money laundering for Ray's operation, believing it was simply a tax evasion scheme. When he discovered the truth, he went to the FBI, becoming an informant to atone for his unwitting complicity. "I can never undo my mistake," the letter concluded, "but I can try to save these children. Forgive me, my love. Keep our son safe." As dawn broke, I sat with the letter, understanding at last the burden Thomas had carried, the redemption he'd sought. Not a perfect hero, but a flawed man who'd chosen to do right in the end. Upstairs, I heard Elliot stirring. My son, not a monster, but a boy who'd carried his father's legacy forward, completing the mission Thomas had died for. I folded the letter carefully. Some truths were too heavy for 17-year-old shoulders, no matter how strong. This one could wait until he was ready. For now, it was enough to know that Thomas had died trying to save others. And in the end, through Elliot, he had succeeded.